Well, cities across this country are starting to take action to defund the police force. In fact, most noticeably, NYPD's police force. Lauren Simonetti is live with the potential fallout. Lauren.
That's right, Charles. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio wants to shift funding from the NYPD, which has a $6 billion budget, to youth and social services, and he has some support from the police department to do so. Commissioner Dermot Shea says this, quote, "To help the kids at our city, I'm 1,000% behind shifting some funding from the police to youth programs." Charles, Minneapolis wants to go even further. A majority of its city council supporting a measure to dismantle the city's police department following the death of George Floyd in its custody. Although Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey is not on board.
Am I for entirely abolishing the police department? No, I'm not. And so over the coming days and weeks, I'm looking forward to working with council and talking with them about deciphering what particularly they mean when they say ending and abolishing.
So what does a police-free or fewer police future actually look like? Charles, no one is certain, but I can tell you this. Congressional Democrats today introduced legislation that is being called transformative. It recommends changes that will make it easier to fire and prosecute problematic officers, as well as revamp how all police are trained, including the ban on chokeholds. Meanwhile, the protest movement is expected to continue with momentum now building for justice system reform. And Charles, that's what we're starting to see right now.
Lauren Simonetti, thank you very much. Joining me now with reaction, former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Kerik. Commissioner, this thing is coming at us pretty quickly. It's we're used to hearing this sort of rhetoric, and it hangs around for a few years. But you've got the city of Minneapolis actually saying, no, we're going to go through with this, and other cities are watching it as a model.
You know what's funny, Charles, when you were talking to Senator Scott and he was talking about what they do in China and how they do it and why, and the Communist Party, what we're hearing is right out of the Antifa handbook, which parallels what they do in Communist China. So it's kind of odd to listen to him. I almost thought he was talking about Minneapolis. Here's the bottom line. You defund the police or diminish their ability to police their communities, you're going to have a war zone. We learned this back in the 90s. In 1990, there were 2,400 murders in New York City. When Giuliani came in 1994, he basically came in with a model that nobody was going to live, visit, or work, or go to school in a place where they weren't safe. So his number one priority was to reduce crime. And for every percentage point we did, we saw income, economic income, highest rates. We saw the highest property values. We saw lowest poverty, the lowest murder, the lowest violent crime. Communities were much better off. You start taking that away, you take the police's ability to do their job, you're going to see the reverse. That's all there is to it.
Commissioner, Attorney General Bill Barr sat down with Fox News' Bret Baier, and he says that we're treading down a dangerous slope. I want to share this with you in the audience.
Today, the police chiefs, the rank and file officers understand the need for change, and there has been great change. And I think defunding the police, holding the entire police structure responsible for the actions of certain officers is wrong, and I think it's dangerous to demonize police.
So he's obviously echoing what you're saying, but he also said that there was a need for reform. Are there any reforms that you would be behind, whether it was more training, neighborhood patrols, because if some of these things with people filming what we saw in Minneapolis, it's just going to get the public more outraged, and we're going to get the defunding that I agree with you is not the answer.
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Charles. What we watched in Minneapolis was an outright murder. In my opinion, it was a first-degree murder, and that guy should go to prison for the rest of his life that did it. But as the Attorney General just said, you can't annihilate the entire police service of the country based on a few bad apples. And basically, that's what we have. What we see is not systematic racism. It's not systematic police brutality. But where there is systematic things going on that nobody's focused on, every single weekend, we see masses of young black people slaughtered in Chicago, and there's no outrage. Nobody's saying a word. You and I have talked about this.
There's not the proper outrage for that. I agree with you there, but should the chokehold be removed? I saw a video where two cops were arresting someone. He was on the ground, and one cop went for his gun. So it just seemed logical to me. If you had a hard time holding this person down with 4 hands, it would be harder with 3 and make it more likely that this person would get shot. In other words, just techniques to arresting or confronting folks. Should there be any sort of changes with those?
Well, I think those are things you could look at, but also equipment, Charles. Why do you have 3 guys trying to hold a guy down on the ground or fight a guy to get him in handcuffs? If you have 3 or 4 guys trying to get one guy in handcuffs, you should have a taser. You should have other equipment. Police departments have to look at equipment. They have to look at training. They have to look at resources.
We're out of time. It's been a long time. I enjoy our conversations, and there's a lot more I want to talk to you about, so I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, sir.